Taxi1010.com is one of the weirdest websites I've ever stumbled upon that was created by a man named Richard Amez Hart, making a website specifically about bullies and verbal violence, having poorly drawn images posted everywhere all over the website. Also, having an entire 166-page book on non-escalating verbal self-defense, and having random parts of this entire website creating replies for conversations, calling it verbal tools. When opening Taxi1010.com, you can find 6 colored squares with 3 words you can click. The first one is moon, second rose, and the third one is fish. When you click on these 3 words, they give you 3 different results. Rose leads you to an error. Clicking on fish brings up a new part of the website called Treasury for Bad People. And the moon brings you to another part of the website called African Blue that seems to just come off as a massive thought dump that holds very questionable words. This is the first thing you see clicking on fish. Creatures without thought. You cannot defend what you cannot see. It's a shock to learn. I'm the evening. At twilight, the simple white fence surrounding the city became the stage and the featured act. There's a parking lot against the wall. Timing, just lucky. I'll build you a roof that history avoided. All I can really configure from this is that maybe Richard is trying to paint a picture for this treasure story. And believe it or not, all of these underlined phrases or websites are all clickable, sending you even deeper into the spiral of Richard's entire website. Aim. Most people can't afford the tension induced by excessive small talk, arguing with nitwits, or aggressive bullying. As Kevin T. McCartney says, they don't know how to find the sweet spot in responding. Anything that brings about sadness, sorrow, deprivation, or dislike in anyone merits consideration. Find the source, quick as lightning. People flip you false coins, backwards and upside down. Switch them for real coins. This could clear ourselves. Turn this around, intercept life, and find exceptions to the general misery, then escape. I guess this is the real meaning of fish, and right below this is a ton of phrases and ways he would respond to them, using his personal method called wings. In Richard's words, wings is a metaphor for sayings to get out of bullies' baiting tactics, as a way to, quote, fly away from baiting. In these phrases that he gives responses to goes on and on, with many ways to combat arguments, to respond sarcastically. And it seems to be, scrolling down fish, you get a lot of different examples of how to use his wings in many specific and different scenarios. Like even picking candy from one of those kind candy employees at those random candy shops in the mall offering you a sample. To even question-like scenarios like being asked if you've done adultery, and a response, of course, ready for it. This may seem like some kind of schizoid website for a socially insane individual, creating lists for every possible question or scenario of what they perceive as bullying, so it's easier for them to respond when needed. Or maybe thinking Richard just thinks this is the best way to teach socially awkward people able to respond easier using his wings. Although one thing leaves me in question that I can't quite understand. All these phrases we have been assuming as scenarios are actually clickable as well, leading you to a page known as Stargates. And believe it or not, every single one of these, quote, Stargates are numbered. There is 88 Stargates, and maybe even more. But from what researchers have found, it seems to be 88 Stargates in total. Looking at one of these Stargate pages comes off like a doctor's patient sheet, meaning all of these phrases and scenarios are maybe the person saying the phrase in their mind and giving diagnostics, like quandaries too, and naming them what he perceives the question as. For example, the question, did you ever commit adultery, comes up with many different, quote, patients. One of them is the patient I'll call Eyeball. The Eyeball patient is a nitwit 3 and diagnosed ambush 3, giving a diagnosis on maybe the person who asked Richard these questions. But that's only a guess, as there is an age that comes with all of the patients. Next is showing you the toolset. What I am guessing is the wings you would choose in the scenario of socializing. And right next to the toolbox is an informal fallacy. The authority of the one plays upon our reluctance to challenge famous or smooth-talking people. Competence in one field does not necessarily indicate competence in another. As well as a note to himself, incessant follow-ups heaping it on. Strategic and tactical unknowns. You reframe what they say and add a little something. You just have to find your niche. It's always good to make yourself out to be poor. A lot of times, all they've got is pretense. They disdain real workers, real intellects. Maybe that's why some people don't wipe. And from what I am making up of this, he sees these questions as challenges to him. Hence why he has wings ready to use at his disposal for any cross-reference or possible question. But if you scroll right below our patient eyeball, we find a massive chart sheet. This chart sheet has a list of trick questions on the left side of the chart, then wing words he uses to avoid what he perceives as ambush 3 questions. And on the right side of the chart are his ideas of responding to trick questions from what he perceives as a, quote, bad child. Now this is where it breaks into what exactly is a bad child in Richard's terms. Well, clicking on the word bad child will lead you to a 166-page book dedicated to the oldest child. So from what I can gather from this, I think he is saying older children are perceived as troublemakers. And this is a book for older children to understand verbal cues, to not escalate into something more. Page II is the psychology of verbal tools. As you can notice, the wing phrases are in here. So this all means that wings is actually a part of a whole other part of the website known as verbal tools. The psychology of verbal tools. Here's a simple problem. You want to reject someone without lying, going into long explanations or making a scene without thinking too much about it. So you say, bad timing. Then, if they say, why is it bad timing, you have a backup ready. You say many things. These 2 responses are verbal tools. Here are some others useful for rejection. Too soon, too early, someone else. And for extraordinarily complicated cases, in which you are better off simply telling the truth, you begin by saying, it's insane. Then you level, strangely enough, the best way to reject someone is to hurt their feelings. For instance, if an underage girl asks you out on a date, begin by saying, yeah, sure. Then add, next time you come to work drunk, I'm going to tell your father. It's what old-timers called tonic, whose sole purpose was to make life easier for people. This book is about verbal tools derived from the close observations of verbal abusers on one hand, and wise elders on the other. It answers the question, how do some people know just how to make everyone laugh while letting both abuser and defender save face at the same time? Totally natural. I hope you enjoy it. So far, fish just kinda comes off as a part of the website meant for socially awkward people. Although rather extensive in explanation, I bet it was maybe useful for someone out there back in 2006, or maybe even today. From what I see so far of this website, although it's only scratching the surface of a massive rabbit hole, I am guessing this entire website is made for troubled teens or adults, having complications communicating like Richard could be, and finds Richard's website as a knowledgeable website back in the day, which is quite confusing to me. Throughout this website, there are so many random things you can click on that lead you all down a 30-minute to hour-long rabbit hole of only a singular page of the website that seems to have 300 plus different website pages linked into it. Obviously, I am not going to sit and talk about the entire hundreds of pages on this website, but the pages I have found are just pure confusing, which is why this entire website comes off so incredibly schizoid. One of the posts that I have found genuinely leaves me disgusted, confused, and plenty of other little buzzwords the brain can conjure. If we go back to African Blue, that you get to by clicking Moon at the homepage, is where it gets at its most weird, bringing you poorly made artwork and some random thing about sailors that descends into more Stargates and ideas of Richard's, with some of them coming off very short and manic, with a title called Learning to Lean into the Future, as a random insert at the bottom of all of this. I was born inside a writer's block, R-word, and left to my own devices. Internet prawn fuels my sense of humor. The anonymous overlords of the platforms think I'm dangerous, though I'm not, unless you hate little girls. That's the reason you don't see more of them. With a drawing that is possibly an illustration of a child in a way I refuse to speak on. I am obviously not going to show this art piece. And scrolling even further down African Blue, it progressively gets more sporadic and scary, really implementing the genuine paranoia Richard goes through with social interactions. Gaslighting. In a strange way, whenever anyone says anything to you at all, they're gaslighting you. That is, they are influencing you, poisoning you, making you crazy, especially when you are wide open. Say, on a vacation and don't even know your own name. Right below this gaslighting summary is literally a way how he thinks humans are constantly trying to update our inner software when we sleep, as this is what Richard thinks dreaming actually is. Scrolling through the African Blue webpage just brings you more summaries on random words or ideas, like negative first impressions, bully inflation, even defining cherry picking, to even ways how to respond to Mr. Trump, with random drawings or paintings, and most of these random topics that are under African Blue come off as stories, but one story sticks out to me the most. The Insane Asylum. The Insane Asylum is a story explaining something traumatic that we suppose happened to Richard. I'll not say the word out of respect, but Richard was used against his will for obvious pleasures that deeply traumatized Richard, as Richard describes being curled under a sink in the hospital when he was just a child, crying after the incident, to later be discovered by party goers. This is when Richard explains how this entire incident made him see what he calls stonewalling faces forever. Stonewalling, by definition, is something you do to usually avoid deep topics or controversy/confrontation. Yesterday, on Oakland BART platform, I saw echoes of those same stonewalling faces after I stumbled into an open door and cried out, "Is this the train to Richmond?" 16 people looked blankly at me, as if I violated all rules of decency. Finally, the Mexican man closest to me, out of both the corner of my eye and out of his own kindness, said calmly, "Yes, it is." He further explains that person who took advantage of him at a young age happened to be homosexual, leaving Richard with struggles of understanding himself, calling himself a turkey, which is someone he claims to be an individual who secretly wants to be homosexual. The pretty nurses in the hospital were indeed nice to me, and I never forgot that, which may be my luck. Back to the turkeys. They just don't want anyone to know. I mainly went into this seeing it as another insane website that had the potential of just being a super old ARG no one really covered. But instead, diving into this website, you start to make connections to how Richard talks and how the website works. It comes off as just an entire diary for the sake of his state of mind, and maybe showing others to maybe help or to profit off of his story and website. But from what I can make of this entire website is the cries of a person who was used at a young age in ways no one should ever be. And through that traumatizing moment of life, his child self wasn't given any time to sit back and come to closure properly as to what happened. Because of the nature of his trauma and the way he felt dismissed when seeing people's faces in that moment, that sadly stuck with him for the rest of his life. Finding ways to cope with people's complexion and small talk, with small insert phrases that he sees as a way to get out of conversations, to make life simply less stressful for someone as paranoid and socially awkward as Richard, that carries very troubling emotional baggage. Which leads me to the last thing I want to cover of taxi1010.com. There's a part of taxi1010.com that you can find in the collage of hundreds to maybe even thousands of web pages connected to this site that is just called Window Pane. Window Pane shows 6 clickable images of a glass doorknob, and clicking all of these gives you different parts of his mental state that should have been looked into a little more. Clicking on the first doorknob is a backdrop image of a woman from the past in a family photo that I have reverse searched and comes with no trace, which leads me to assume these are photos of his family, and the woman in the back could just be his mother or even sister. The URL is titled Evolutionary Art with the URL saying My Home. This entire collage has 4 more doorknobs that you can click. That leads to either the home page, an art piece called Flying Horse, a web page meant to show off more artwork in his websites, and then another artwork called Rosebud's Dream. Going back to the main 6 doorknobs, we click on the second, and this brings us to an artwork called Second Snow, and clicking on the third brings you a drawing called Weaving. Clicking on the 4th doorknob brings you an art piece called Chris, and clicking on any images of Chris will send you to more art with doorknobs that tell you what's behind them, which usually is more art expressed in a different way, like this photo collage here of what seems to be his life. And clicking the 5th doorknob sends you to what Chris sent you to, so you can explore more of his art pieces. But the 6th and final doorknob I have saved for the end of this website. This doorknob sends you to the Web Page Design's official page, where Richard explains his state of mind in the most coherent ways possible. The change has been going on for quite some time now, and I'm not sure when it started. It's probably been going on since before I left the womb. But for some unknown reason, people all of my life have been pointing me in this direction, and now here I am telling you this. Just like people have been pointing you in this direction, or that direction, and right now our paths have crossed for just a minute. Some have lit up the way, and some have tried to bury an axe in my brain, so to speak, except for my book covers. I did sell them, but not in the traditional sense. I never sold any art in the traditional sense that I can remember. But if my mother could come back from the grave, she might say, "Don't you remember that year I offered you $50 and if you would paint me a picture?" And I painted one. And it was probably the one she said, "No, I don't want that one. I don't like the face over there on that side." It's the one I spent $50 having framed. And I remember the girl at the frame shop saying, "Do you know the artist?" I figured it was her way of being nice. My parents used to ask for my paintings for Christmas. And I remember one time my dad saying, "Can't you paint any of the people so they have clothes on?" He keeps my pictures back in his dressing room. I guess he thinks they might get some clothes on eventually. Or he doesn't want his friends to think he's a pornographer. My brother got into it. He asked me to do a book cover for 3 of his books. I love doing them, and ever since then, and even way before that, I've been sporadically going back to my art. In one house, I even set up an art room where I could leave my oil paints out overnight or all week long. Forever if I wanted to, until I was ready to paint and clean brushes again. Then I remarried and had another baby. I couldn't very well leave my art out anywhere then. The house we lived in was small. My art just vanished for a while. Then my brother suggested I get a really great computer. No, I don't think he did. I remember we both just got a hankering to spend a lot of money on the latest and greatest Mac we could buy. And then each of us, within a few months, had a new Mac. He suggested I get a Dreamweaver, and I did. And then, I'm not sure if he suggested it or not, but he probably did. Or just talked about it without suggesting it. But I got a whole package, a bundle it was called, of Adobe products and just started reading the manuals and making little pictures. Simple pictures, like any 6-year-old could do, like all my art, but different somehow because it was on computer. I didn't have to worry about cleaning up oil paints or putting away everything. Just turn it off. And my baby, then almost 4, was on the old Mac right beside me, playing Putt Putt Goes to the Moon and Pajama Sam and all those early software games we could find. We would spend hours together just playing on our computers. Things have been speeding up though, ever since last February. My brother offered to be partners in Taxi 1010, full partners. And all I had to do was make a few pictures. Richard does the text and the layout. Now, I've got over 90 pictures in our site. We update Taxi 1010 daily. The change in me? I'm not sure I can say what it is just yet, but I'm different. I'm sure I'd be different even without my art. But I love my art. My art is my tool for something wonderful, and it's hard to explain. It's like trying to explain childbirth to a woman pregnant for the first time. You can't really explain it, but you know what it is. It's like that with my art. Something is really different now. It's Taxi 1010. It has changed me. It's by our working together, we have created something greater than either of us alone could ever do. Every week, 1 or 2 of our many visitors stays for an hour or more. Some people bookmark us. Some people run away real fast, like they are afraid that they might see something true. You might read Taxi 1010 and see it, digest it over time, and come back again. Maybe you'll be surprised and pleased at all the changes you'll see. In the end, this entire thing was an entire piece of artwork that was created with Richard putting down the text for his sister's websites to express her story and ways of coping. Richard's sister drew the artwork to leave the website aesthetically pleasing, and as well to share her peace of mind in her art. Something that most saw as some taxi driver's way of coping with manically schizoid ideologies were actually the philosophical art on how a traumatized female artist went through something many have gone through and are forced to deal with it all alone. Overall, I hope I just closed a book that's been open for far too long. Hopefully, everyone is healed from what they have gone through. That was Taxi1010.com, the disarranged internet diary of the mentally shattered artist. If you would like to join my Patreon, it will be clickable right here, or just check the description. It will be with all of my other social media. Thank you for watching, and enjoy your day.